European football is fully back underway now for the new season, but some of the defending champions are still looking to find their domestic form. Manchester City and Bayern both dropping points. Barca lost a shocker to start the season as well. Is that perhaps indicative of bigger problems at those clubs? Is it just a blip? Well, to discuss the results from around Europe, we're going to bring in BR football analyst Sam Tighe in London. Sam, good to see you. Sam Tighe with a silent GH, everybody, by the way. It's very fancy of you, Sam.
It's very Irish, actually, is the answer. But yeah,
not
there you
fancy.
go.
Okay,
Thank you for the public service announcement. I appreciate it.
Tell you what, let's start with Barcelona, because it felt like the standout upset of the weekend. Without Lionel Messi, do they look underwhelming to you?
They were extremely underwhelming on Friday. That's putting it very politely, Kate. There were quite a lot of problems with that performance. Obviously, without Messi, the microscope shines quite brightly on, well, quite intensely on other players. We saw Griezmann make his first start in La Liga for Barcelona. He and Jordi Alba didn't really look like they knew each other's first names, to be honest. They just kept getting each other's way. There's no chemistry between them on the left-hand side. I thought Frenkie de Jong's role was a little bit different to how he plays for the Netherlands and for Ajax, and that created some problems. We have to give credit to Athletic because they pressed de Jong really hard and they made sure that he couldn't impact the game too much, and they scored a worldie. But at the end of the day, Barca, they hit the woodwork twice. They lost to an incredible goal. Suarez got injured. It wasn't horrendous. It's just definitely not the sort of tone that you want to start your season on, is it? Agreed. Boys?
Well, especially for Valverde, I think the pressure is going to ramp up on him pretty quickly. The pressure was on Valverde last season when they went out to Liverpool in the Champions League, and there's questions. I don't think he's ever felt like the right fit at Barcelona for the way that they want to play, and he came in and he tried to make it a little bit more pragmatic, and we saw Barcelona in a 4-4-2, which is almost sacrilegious at the Camp Nou, and now you have a team, and I question Barcelona's recruitment policy. I mean, it seems very un-Barca-like to now be wanting to go and trying to get Neymar and almost scrambling to get Neymar. Coutinho's out the door. If you have injuries, Ousmane Dembele has been pretty much non-stop injured since he's been there. We see the talent, but he hasn't quite fit in, and then you bring in a guy like Antoine Griezmann for big money, who in many ways is going to take the spaces from Lionel Messi. It's going to take time, I think, for some of the new signings to blend in and to mix in, but it's been an interesting transition for this team, especially coming out of an era where you had the Xavis and Iniestas and players like that, and it still does for me so much, as always, hinge on Lionel Messi being the focal point of that team.
Yeah, I agree completely with you, and it's weird because for so long we had this identity of what Barcelona looked like. Tiki-taka, we had the maestros and Iniesta and Xavi pulling the strings, and then, as you said, they bring in Valverde, who hasn't really won over many fans. It's one thing if you change the approach and you change the way that your team's going to play and you have success. Yes, they won La Liga, but ultimately this team is measured by how they do in Champions League. And to go out the way they did to Liverpool, a lot of question marks are going to be asked of them. And then the players, I agree with you about the players they brought in, Stu. It does seem kind of like a panicked effect. And that these players are being brought in, I'm not sure what system they're looking to play. You bring in a guy like Griezmann, who's usually been playing in a 4-4-2 formation more centrally, and now you're asking him to play on the wing. He naturally has the inclination to want to tuck inside. Dembele's been injured quite a bit. You let go of Coutinho now, who hasn't settled well, but maybe this was a chance for him to actually put his stamp on this team. So there's just a lot of question marks surrounding this team and the direction that they're going to go in. So.
Can it end up being a tricky time as well for Valverde if you've got Luis Suarez, who came out injured out of that game? You've got Messi, who's not yet back to be fit. Coutinho, you've already moved on. Could it be a tricky time for him?
Yeah, I mean, Sam, I'm not sure what you think as far as maybe if there's any other transfers Barcelona could do, but we haven't. In fact, if Suarez is injured and he's out for a couple of weeks now with this calf injury, they really don't have another natural striker other than Antoine Griezmann on this team.
Well, that's not too bad a fullback plan, is it, Griezmann?
Yeah, it's not a bad one, but I mean, as far as what they could do, what Barcelona are when they have multiple options up front.
And who plays around them?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad timing, isn't it, the whole thing? Coutinho leaves, Dembele gets injured, Suarez gets injured. All of a sudden, a reasonably deepish squad starts to look quite thin because of an injury crisis. Stu, you referenced it taking time to come together. It absolutely does. The question then becomes, does Valverde get it? Because you're right, Champions League is the barometer. The pressure's on, this messy window, this Champions League they want. They need it. Will he get the time? Can he put it together?
Let's talk a little bit about Real Madrid as well, because I think it was an interesting result for them over the weekend. 3-1 away win over Celta Vigo. They were down to 10 men. They did manage to hold on and score and put the game out of reach all the same. Zidane not able to call on the big new signings. No Eden Hazard. Forced to rely on the old stones that he had very much wanted to move on and treated relatively poorly in Gareth Bale, James Rodriguez. What did you make of this result, Sam?
Really, really good considering the situation they're in and the cloud that has been hanging over this team through pre-season due to results and performances, and the fact that there's perhaps a struggle between Zidane and Perez in terms of, does he get Pogba, does he get Eriksen, are the transfers actually who he wanted? Because there weren't any new signings in this team to start the season. Now, Hazard probably would have been in, you'd say, if he was fit, but he wasn't. But this was the old guard, and they did really well. They need to find some kind of fresh impetus, and they need to find some kind of motivation to carry on here, because look, they've won a lot in this time, and last season was a complete disaster. So to see someone like Toni Kroos stepping forward, playing really well and scoring a beautiful goal, that's all Real Madrid fans need to see. Okay, we didn't quite get to see the new ones yet, but those guys that seriously underperformed last season, they're the ones that need to step up first and foremost, and they did. But it's only one game. Celta Vigo, 17th place last season.
Yeah, it's the most Real Madrid thing ever. This saga, Gareth Bale, Zidane wants him out the door. He was almost going to China. He comes back. They have other players on the bench. Zidane starts him in the first game, and Gareth Bale sets up the first goal to Benzema. Yeah. It's an interesting position because, to Sam's point, they did underperform last season. It was a group of players that everyone was saying, okay, they've had their run, 3 straight Champions League, move them on, new players in the door. They signed Luka Jovic, they signed Eden Hazard, a couple players. But yet, we've seen multiple times with this group, when they are motivated and when they want to play, they are still one of the best teams in Europe. And there was I think it was when Zidane came in last season, they'd had enough. I mean, it was almost like they checked out completely, and the results hadn't gone their way. Then once they're out of the Champions League and they were knocked out by Ajax, they didn't care about the rest of La Liga season and did just enough to finish in the Champions League season. And yet I wonder if enough of this storm, and it's very Madrid, and they almost embrace this, and they have people doubting them again, that they become more dangerous.
I'm just curious to really see how this saga plays out with Gareth Bale, because it was such an ongoing affair last year. This past transfer window, the same thing, all the noise surrounding him and his desire to, whether he wanted to leave, whether he wanted to stay. Zidane made it very vocal that he wanted him to leave, and then he goes out and puts on a performance like that. So we know that he has the quality. With Hazard being out injured, we know Vinicius Jr. is going to get his opportunities because he's a talented star player. I'm curious to see if he can force his way into this team, if he can really force his way to be a big player for this team going forward this season.
Another team worth talking about in La Liga, Atletico Madrid kicked off their campaign with a 1-0 win over Getafe. Joao Felix making his debut. Looked very, very special indeed. One of the brightest prospects
just watch this.
in the world game, Sam.
Come in. Ooh, nutmeg. And then see you later. I mean, what about this? Balance, strength, speed, power, just the ability to then go by and draw the penalty. I mean, this is why they paid the money for him, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. This was thrilling. This lit up what was like one of the most aggressive games of football I've seen in quite a while. Atletico versus Getafe is about as brutal as it gets in La Liga, I think. So it was quite nice to see this, because 2 red cards in the first half had actually made it a little bit of a drab affair, in my opinion. But then Felix is always capable of doing this kind of thing. And you mentioned the strength and the balance here. I met him about 3 weeks ago. He came to the Bleacher offices, and he's like a rake. He's stick thin. I don't know where it is. I don't know where he hides it.
I did the same thing. I met him at the MLS All-Star game, and he did. He looks like a 14-year-old boy as far as his stature, but it almost, I know he keeps getting this comparison to Ronaldo as a young Ronaldo. Yep. You do see part of that, and it's natural. He's Portuguese, but when he fills out a little bit, and every other player in Atletico looks like they've been pumping iron like Mo Edu. We're going to see Joao Felix with some Mo Edu, maybe not that big Mo biceps, and when he gets that strength as well to go with it, he's going to be the next big thing.
Can we talk Bundesliga as well for a minute, please? Because Bayern Munich started off the Bundesliga season, first game of their season, 2-2 draw with Hertha Berlin. Not necessarily what we're expecting. Niko Kovac not really looking 100% bulletproof, a lot of question marks over his tactical ability too. One of the first managers you would tip to go this season?
A lot of pressure is going to be on him for sure. Yes, they won the Bundesliga last year, but overall they were underwhelming at times. You lose 2 players in Ribéry and Robben, and you're trying to find replacements for them. Leroy Sané, there was a whole saga surrounding him, whether he's going to come, whether he's not going to come. He tears his ACL, so now they're in a scramble. They don't have much depth in that area. They signed Perisic, and now they bring in Coutinho. I don't know if Coutinho was on the radar.
How do you like that as a fit for Bayern?
Early on, it wasn't something I would have thought of, but at this point in time, I like it. I think for him as the player, it's a chance to get out of the shadow of Messi, get out of the shadow of everything that's happened at Barcelona. He can play centrally. He can play wide for them, which are two areas where I think that they need some help.
It has the potential a little bit to be James Rodriguez-esque, though.
I don't know. I like the profile.
Did you see the pictures of him holding up his new shirt?
No.
Zero smile. Didn't crack a smile.
Nah, he looked like he was happy to be there.
Should show those big gnashers off.
He looked like he was happy. I just think that I think this could be the fresh start that he kind of needs. We all know he has the talent, the ability. And in this team, I think he'll get some joy to actually express it a little bit more.
Speaking of talent, Jaden Sancho. I mean, the reason that we're talking about Bayern Munich is because Borussia Dortmund loaded up again this summer, bringing some experience, a guy like Mats Hummels, bringing Torgan Hazard in as well. But they have a guy in Jaden Sancho who last year lit the Bundesliga on fire. He was sensational. Youngster came from Man City. Young Englishman has made his full England debut. He looks well and truly up for it again this season. He's just full of talent, speed, and he is a guy that is a real game changer. Sam, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I love watching this guy play.
Oh, I worship the ground he walks on. Honestly, it's so nice to have such a super talented player from my country to really fall. Like, it's just amazing to watch him play and his rise over the last 18 months or so. Involved in all 5 goals at the weekend, scored the first one obviously, and then just carried on creating, crossing, passing. Just ridiculous, really. He has no limits. He's two-footed. He dribbles past everyone. He's got an eye for a pass. Like, he's just like the complete player, and he's a joy to watch. And probably going to be in that conversation at the end of the year, injury withstanding, for basically Bundesliga Player of the Year. Because for me, Dortmund are going to win the title. I think they can do it this year. I think this is the year that Bayern's dominance, its 7 titles now, comes to an end. And the reason I think that, first and foremost, is because this kid is ridiculous.
You're drinking the Kool-Aid too. You and Mo thinking that Dortmund are going to win it. Bayern have everybody fooled, as they do every year. We get this conversation at the start of every Bundesliga season and try to make a case for teams that can do it. And I do think it's going to be close. I mean, it came down to the wire. Dortmund had a 9-point lead at one point last year, but. Look, Bayern Munich are Bayern Munich, and when they are questioned and people challenge them, they step it up a gear. And I know you miss guys like Ribéry and Robben, some experienced players. I just don't see it. I think Bayern Munich win the league again.
Let's talk Premier League, because Manchester City, of course, one of the perennial contenders for Champions League glory, haven't quite managed to find it yet. They drew with Spurs at the weekend, came after Gabriel Jesus' late strike ended up being ruled out via VAR due to handball. They thought they'd won it. It's kind of deja vu from Champions League, isn't it? Guardiola actually described this as one of their more illuminating performances of his 3-year reign. Would you agree with that, Sam?
City's performance was incredible, absolutely incredible. They were really hard done by in this game. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne was pulling strings from midfield in a slightly more advanced role than we've seen him over the last 2 years. An absolute joy to watch. Some of the crosses he produces are just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But then again, you can probably criticise him a little bit for missing a few chances, because look, 30 shots for City, 2 went in, well, technically 3, but that one was ruled out. It's awful that the talking point from this game happens to be the decision, the handball and VAR, based on what was such a sensational Manchester City performance. And Tottenham pretty lucky to get themselves a point from that one, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, City were unbelievable that game. De Bruyne was a standout player. The VAR decision, though, Stu, we've talked about it off camera a little bit. I think the issue, or the real root of the problem, is the actual change of the handball rule. I think that's what people mainly have the issue with. But now, because VAR has been introduced to the game, it's foreign to a lot of people that haven't been experienced with it in previous years. So naturally, the inclination is just to point towards VAR as I hate VAR. I hate VAR because they're getting the calls right, according to how the law is written. So I actually am in favor of VAR. I think it makes it's proven so far to get the calls correctly.
So do you think that should have been a goal? Should have been kept as a goal, the Man City one?
Based on how the rules have been changed?
No, but do you think?
Based on how the rules,
think it should have been a goal?
Yeah, but me personally, no, I don't like that. But I'm saying, but based on the introduction of VAR and how the rules are written, they got it right.
They did. Yeah.
It's harsh. It's harsh.
All right, we're going to bring you more build-up to the Champions League playoffs. Oh, Sam, I almost forgot to thank you. I'm so sorry, love. It was great to see you. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow, potentially, for more, I think. And if not, very soon indeed.
See you tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
See you later.